What happens when the city that never sleeps is suddenly forced into a coma, unable to even fill its own restaurants? Just imagine the chilling spectacle of a Friday night on the Las Vegas Strip. The neon signs flicker desperately, casting a lurid glow on rows of tables at world-famous eateries that sit hauntingly empty. Behind closed doors, terrified employees whisper about their hours being brutally slashed. Panicked managers scramble to concoct pathetic new deals, while chefs watch in disbelief as their $150 steak dinners are humiliatingly slashed to $48 just to beg customers to return. How did Sin City plummet from a mecca of all-you-can-eat buffets to a graveyard of desperate discounts? Stay with us, because the horrifying truth behind Vegas's dying restaurant scene exposes a rot that goes far deeper than just a few overpriced cocktails. This is a catastrophic warning for the entire city. This is the ruinous price of unchecked greed, where a meal now costs more than the memories it was meant to create. Here is a reality check so shocking it borders on criminal. Las Vegas, a city built on the promise of affordable indulgence, has quietly betrayed its public, becoming one of the most obscenely expensive food cities in America. According to horrified locals, you can now find a better value meal in New York, Chicago, or even Paris than on the Strip. That's not a joke. Sin City, the very place that lured millions with $2 shrimp cocktails, is now infamous for its $45 burgers, its arrogant $1,000 steaks, and its insulting mandatory experience fees. The frontline restaurant workers are admitting the fallout is nothing short of brutal. Weeknights have become a desolate wasteland, and the meager weekend crowds can't even begin to sustain a payroll. The foreign tourists, the lifeblood who once flooded the Strip with their accents, cameras, and generous tips, are vanishing. As one disgusted diner quipped, "Why would I pay $17.99 for a steak and lobster that costs $12.99? Just last year when I can cook something superior in my own home?" But the fleecing doesn't stop there. Add to that the predatory resort fees baked into receipts and the audacious automatic 20% tips calculated after all the taxes and fees, and suddenly every single meal feels like a calculated shakedown. The economic chain reaction is absolutely devastating. When dining out becomes a luxury reserved for the elite, locals are forced to retreat. Tourists recoil in shock, and entire restaurants pivot into a desperate, cutthroat survival mode. Even the so-called high-end palaces like Hakkasan are now shamelessly advertising all-you-can-eat brunches for $48, a humiliating price slashed from their usual $150. In a pathetic attempt to stop the bleeding, Resorts World has already scrapped its parking fees and is on the verge of killing resort fees altogether, desperately clawing to regain a shred of its lost identity. For the employees, this corporate greed means dangerously unstable hours and vanishing tips. For the investors, it signals collapsing profit margins during what should be a booming summer season. And for the city's very soul, it corrodes the sacred promise that built Vegas from the ground up: indulgence at a bargain. When a town that built an empire on offering more for less shamelessly flips the script to sell less for more, customers will simply abandon you. They're already fleeing to Reno, to Phoenix, and even to international cities like Mexico City, all of which are eagerly swooping in to claim the market Vegas so arrogantly threw away. So, if the restaurants are bleeding out behind the neon facade, what in God's name is happening to the casinos that once subsidized those legendary cheap buffets? The answer drags us even deeper into the terrifying spectacle of Vegas's entire business model unraveling. Empty tables, deserted streets, and the ghosts of vanished tourists. Picture this absolute nightmare. It is 8 p.m. on a Tuesday in the supposedly beating heart of the Las Vegas Strip. Normally, traffic would be a roaring beast, sidewalks would be a river of humanity, and restaurants would be overflowing. But this year is a catastrophe. Locals are reporting a scene that was once utterly unthinkable. Vast, desolate rows of empty tables at iconic landmarks like the Eiffel Tower restaurant, even at the absolute peak of the summer season. The Strip, once an unstoppable global magnet for travelers now feels like a hollowed-out ghost town, stripped of its life and its purpose. The employees are the canaries in this toxic coal mine. Servers confess they have never seen the international crowd so terrifyingly scarce. The World Series of Poker, an event that was once a global institution, was described by one player as shockingly American, a grim testament to how few Europeans or Canadians even bothered to show up. A hostile climate of visa nightmares, bureaucratic traps, and chilling stories from the border are erecting an invisible wall, keeping foreign visitors out. As one local bluntly put it, why would anyone risk a vacation that could end in a Louisiana detention center just for a weekend in Vegas? And when those deep foreign wallets disappear, the economic agony spreads like a virus. International tourists are the lifeblood, the ones who spend more, dropping fortunes on fine dining and spectacular shows. Their absence isn't just hurting servers. It is a death knell that threatens to bring the entire fragile hospitality ecosystem crashing down into ruin. As the river of high rollers dries up, even the temples of celebrity chefs are becoming ghost towns, their dining rooms hauntingly empty, while the humble, family-run eateries, once sustained by the scraps, are now completely starved of customers. And don't be fooled by the weekend charade. The locals can't possibly plug this gaping wound. Sure, Friday and Saturday nights might put on a brave face, but the weekdays? They're a desolate, soul-crushing wasteland. In a shocking turn of events, the once proud titans of the Strip are now groveling at the feet of influencers and vloggers, begging them to hawk discount menus, a move so desperate it would have been utterly laughable just a few short years ago. Mark my words, when kitchens boasting Michelin stars are cold calling YouTubers for a free shout out, you're not just witnessing desperation, you're watching the very soul of the city begin to rot. The damage here isn't just financial. These cavernous, empty dining rooms are more than just a bad look. They're a cancer on the city's psyche. Visitors can feel the energy bleeding out, the excitement evaporating, and this toxic perception is fast-tracking Vegas into a terminal decline. A city built on hype lives and dies by its momentum. Once that vibrant pulse flatlines, resuscitation is nearly impossible. But listen, if the vanishing international crowd is a deep gash, there's another wound, a self-inflicted one that cuts straight to the bone. The locals, the city's own lifeblood, are abandoning it in droves. And the reason is a brutal betrayal. The very people who built this town can no longer afford to live in it. This grim reality is the prologue to an even more disturbing chapter in this story of decay. What happens when the residents themselves can no longer afford to participate in the fantasy they're paid to uphold? For decades, Vegas peddled a seductive illusion. Sure, the locals might not be big gamblers, but they were always promised a seat at the table, a discount to dine, drink, and revel in the spectacle of the Strip. Today, that foundational lie is shattering before our very eyes. Lifelong residents now confess they'd sooner drive right past that iconic neon glow than be extorted for a $25 hamburger. Or be forced to pay $19.99 for a shrimp cocktail that was once a legendary $4.99 bargain. Insiders, the restaurant workers themselves, confirm a chilling new reality. The weekends offer fleeting spasms of activity. The wedding parties, the bachelor blowouts, the high rollers burning through cash, but come Monday, the locals vanish, leaving a deafening silence. The grim result is a landscape of half-empty dining rooms, just echoing halls of failure until the Friday frenzy briefly returns. This forces establishments into a desperate corner, slashing their employees' hours and leaning on pathetic promotions just to keep the lights on. For countless Strip restaurants, Friday through Sunday isn't about profit. It's a frantic fight for survival. But Monday through Thursday? That's a slow, agonizing bleed out. And this outrage isn't confined to the Strip. The resentment is boiling over everywhere. Locals are sick of the predatory add-ons, the non-negotiable service charges, the insulting 20% tips calculated on a total already bloated with taxes and fees, and the audacious surcharges for a simple window seat. The message being sent couldn't be clearer or more contemptuous. Vegas has turned its back on its own people. As one vlogger shockingly declared, Vegas right now is the most expensive city I've been to in the US, even more outrageously priced than New York or LA. This is how a death spiral begins. The locals were supposed to be the bedrock, the loyal customers who kept the lights on when tourist season waned. With them gone, businesses squeezed the remaining tourists even harder. But with those visitors already tightening their belts, the financial chasm is becoming an unbridgeable abyss. Is it any surprise that the corporate giants are now frantically scrambling, talking of scrapping their hated parking fees and even resort fees? This isn't generosity. It's a panic-fueled attempt to lure people back to the sinking ship. But here's the ultimate indictment, the detail that exposes the whole rotten system. The places offering actual value are thriving. The buffets, the humble taco joint, the hidden gems that built their reputation on quality. They're packed with both locals and savvy travelers. This is damning proof of a simple truth. Vegas could save itself if it only remembered the formula that made it great: affordability and spectacle. But until that day of reckoning comes, the locals will continue to flee, and their mass exodus sends a terrifying signal across the desert. Because if the city's own people refuse to patronize its establishments, how in the world can you expect tourists to prop up a collapsing scene? And as the residents vanish, a new, more pathetic form of desperation is taking hold. Temples of luxury that once sneered at the common diner are now shamelessly peddling all-you-can-eat gimmicks. This pathetic pivot reveals the terrifying instability rotting the industry from within. The fall from fine dining to all-you-can-eat is a tragic tale of desperation discounts. In Las Vegas, prestige was once the ultimate currency, measured by how hard it was to get in. Nailing a reservation at Gordon Ramsay's Hell's Kitchen or landing that coveted window seat at the Eiffel Tower restaurant was a status symbol, a true badge of honor. But today, those same hallowed halls are desperately hawking coupons and promotions so cheap it would have been considered an insult just a few years ago. Take Hakkasan, once the absolute pinnacle of high roller brunch decadence, now reduced to offering an all-you-can-eat special for a mere $48, a catastrophic fall from its usual $150 per person price tag. Let's be clear, this isn't some clever marketing ploy. This is a life or death struggle. Restaurants that built their entire brand on scarcity are now resorting to cheap buffet-style tricks just to put bodies in seats. Even Resorts World has waved the white flag, scrapping its paid parking and signaling it might finally kill the loathsome resort fees, all in a desperate last-gasp attempt to resurrect the ghost of the old, value-driven Vegas. It's a shocking sign of the times. Whispers are spreading that even the most elite steakhouses are resorting to desperate gambits like unlimited Wagyu nights, a move that would have been utterly unthinkable in this city's recent past. For the staff on the ground, this desperate pivot is a bitter pill of hope and profound humiliation. Sure, these deals might lure in bodies, a flicker of life that keeps the lights on and paychecks coming. But at what cost? Gutting prices also guts the very soul of luxury that once made this city a beacon for tourists. Just imagine shelling out $1,000 for a world-class steak one evening only to see it advertised as an all-you-can-eat buffet item the next? What a slap in the face to your most loyal patrons. The psychological betrayal here is just as catastrophic as the economic fallout. Now, every tourist squints at every price tag with suspicion, consumed by the gnawing fear that they're being fleeced today, just before tomorrow's 50% off special goes viral on TikTok. Locals can only scoff with bitter irony, watching as once untouchable establishments shamelessly grovel for attention, cutting deals with any vlogger or influencer willing to hawk their latest fire sale. But let's be brutally honest. These bargain basement deals are a band-aid on a gaping wound. These aren't signs of a clever strategy. They are screams of desperation, a clear signal of weakness, not strength. They are a public admission that demand has cratered, that profit margins are disintegrating, and that the city's sterling culinary reputation is being ground into dust. A $1.99 margarita might grab a cheap headline, but it does absolutely nothing to rebuild the shattered foundation of long-term trust. Vegas became a titan for decades because it had perfected a delicate, forgotten art: the balance between unapologetic luxury and accessible value. By lurching violently between extortionate fine dining and rock-bottom giveaways, the city is on a collision course to alienate everyone. And if these restaurants cannot find their footing and restore some semblance of stability, the next domino to fall will be terrifyingly larger. The casinos themselves. The very institutions that have propped up the food scene for generations. But that safety net has been shredded. The casinos can no longer bear that weight. For an entire era, Las Vegas restaurants wielded a secret weapon: the casinos. When a buffet dared to charge a mere $4.99 for steak and lobster, it wasn't an act of charity. It was a calculated trap because the house was certain it would claw that money back, and more, on the gaming floor. The food was the bait, the gambling was the kill. But that symbiotic relationship has been irrevocably broken, and it is bleeding the dining scene dry. Behind closed doors, casino executives are forced to admit the horrifying truth. The river of foot traffic is running thin. You can see it in the ghostly rows of empty poker tables and the vast, silent landscapes of half-filled slot floors. The vanishing international high rollers mean there is simply less money to bankroll those legendary dining deals. Without the lifeblood of gambling profits to cushion them, restaurants are being forced to survive on their own. And in the harsh reality of 2025, standing alone means cranking prices to absolutely unsustainable heights. The irony is just savage. In a desperate bid to compensate for falling casino revenues, operators doubled down on their greed, burying customers under an avalanche of hidden fees, service charges, and obscenely overpriced menus. But this predatory strategy backfired spectacularly, driving away the very crowds that once gave the Strip its pulse. And now, the entire model is collapsing under its own weight. The casinos are failing to generate enough gaming revenue, and the restaurants are failing to attract enough paying customers. It's a complete system failure. For the employees caught in this death spiral, the collapse means chaotic schedules and a soul-crushing pressure to constantly upsell, turning hospitality into a shakedown. A server at a premier steakhouse now spends less time recommending a fine wine and more time justifying mandatory gratuities and premium seating scams. Patrons are leaving with a foul taste in their mouths, not from the food, but from the stench of petty extortion that now suffocates the entire experience. And for the city's very identity, the damage is even more profound. Las Vegas forged its legend on a promise of value-driven luxury, a magical place where even a regular person could live like a king for a weekend. But if the casinos can no longer afford to bankroll that grand illusion, then the entire Vegas promise implodes. Without the subsidies, dining becomes a ripoff. Without the diners, the casinos lose their reason to exist. It is a vicious, self-perpetuating cycle, and it is spiraling straight into the ground. And here is the most terrifying thought of all. If the casinos can no longer protect their own restaurants, what hope is there for the rest of the Strip's ecosystem? The shows, the nightclubs, the retail empires, they all rely on the exact same fragile formula: a cheap ticket subsidized by a captive audience's spending. If that formula has failed for food, it is doomed to fail for everything else. And yet, while the Vegas empire falters and bleeds, a new breed of competitor is circling overhead, sensing weakness. These are the rival cities, offering the same intoxicating escape, but without the insulting Vegas price tag. And this is where the cautionary tale turns into a full-blown horror story. The rise of the alternatives, as other cities prepare to pick the bones of a fallen king. There was a time, not so long ago, when Las Vegas stood alone, an undisputed monarch of entertainment. If you craved the spectacle of neon, the genius of celebrity chefs, and the gluttony of bottomless buffets, this was your only destination. Today, however, that wounded giant is being circled by vultures. From the shockingly affordable casinos of Reno Tahoe to the meteoric rise of Phoenix's culinary scene, tourists are having a damning revelation. They can find the same thrills often with superior food for a fraction of the cost. And the restaurant workers, the ones on the front lines, they see the writing on the wall with terrifying clarity. The reign of Vegas is over. It's no longer the undisputed king of getaways. Those loyal travelers who once meticulously saved every dime for a weekend in Sin City are now shamelessly flocking to Mexico City, Miami, or even Nashville. And can you blame them? These rival cities are offering the real deal. Pulsating nightlife and world-class food, without the insulting, predatory fees that bleed you dry at every corner. For anyone flying in from abroad, the decision is a complete no-brainer. Faced with a gauntlet of harsh US border policies and soaring visa costs, Europe and Asia look like a welcoming paradise compared to the increasingly hostile and overpriced Strip. And the restaurants are bearing the brutal brunt of this mass exodus. That Canadian bachelor party that was once a guaranteed Vegas payday? Now they're taking their cash and celebrating in Cabo San Lucas without a second thought. Why wouldn't they? They're getting authentic, fresh tacos, cheap drinks, and, most importantly, no one has the audacity to slap a fraudulent resort fee on their bill. At the same time, discerning American foodies are abandoning Vegas in droves, heading for the genuine culinary scenes of Austin and Charleston, cities that have built their reputations on an authenticity that the soulless corporate chains of Vegas could never hope to replicate. The fallout from this abandonment is absolutely devastating. With their dining rooms empty, Vegas restaurants are now in a desperate race to the bottom, slashing prices just to survive another night. But this pathetic attempt at a comeback, these cheap value menus, only cements the grim reality that the city is in a terminal decline. It's a truth one local influencer didn't hesitate to voice. It's like everyone is just scavenging for the next cheap deal, not searching for the next incredible experience. For decades, Las Vegas smugly dismissed its rivals, believing it held the monopoly on spectacular excess. But that arrogance has come back to haunt them, as other cities now offer the same adrenaline rush without the deceitful hidden fees. Sin City is on the verge of losing its very soul, its claim to indulgence. And if its restaurants can't win on authenticity and are failing on affordability, what in the world is left? This catastrophic collapse of the Strip's dining scene is far more than just empty tables. It's a terrifying crisis of identity. As hungry competitors rise, Vegas is pathetically clinging to cheap gimmicks instead of daring to write its next chapter. And this identity crisis isn't just another problem. It is the single most dangerous threat hanging over this city's future: a complete loss of self. This is what happens when a city forgets its own legend. Las Vegas, once the undisputed champion of reinvention, evolving from mob-run dens in the 1950s to glittering mega resorts in the 90s, always managed to transform itself while honoring its sacred promise: pure indulgence at a price that felt fair. But here, in 2025, that promise is nothing but a distant, broken memory. And nowhere is this betrayal more grotesquely on display than in its dying restaurant scene. The people on the inside, the employees, warn that the city is paralyzed, trapped between two toxic extremes. On one end, you have obscene ultra-luxury that scoffs at the average person. On the other, you have pathetic bargain basement tricks that reek of pure desperation. What's vanished is the magic middle ground that once made Vegas a legend. That incredible feeling that anyone, a teacher from Ohio or a tourist from Tokyo, could feast like a king without going bankrupt. This identity crisis reveals itself in 1,000 small, heartbreaking ways. The iconic buffets, once the very soul of Vegas dining, are being systematically executed, replaced by cynical, overpriced, all-you-can-eat scams that possess none of the original magic. Those celebrity chef restaurants, which once dazzled with their star power, are now a laughingstock, shamelessly charging $30 for the privilege of sitting next to a kitchen window. Even the simple act of tipping has been corrupted, with a mandatory 20% gratuity ambush tacked onto bills after all the other taxes and fees, leaving customers feeling completely scammed instead of valued. For the workers on the front lines, this identity crisis is pure chaos. One week, management orders them to push exclusive premium upgrades. The next, they're forced to hawk desperate value menus and cheap promotions. This whiplash of inconsistency is infuriating for everyone involved, completely shattering the trust that was once the bedrock of the entire Vegas experience. And make no mistake, for the city itself, the stakes are apocalyptic. A tourism empire is built on identity. Paris promises romance. New York promises ambition. Miami promises blistering heat and nightlife. And what does Vegas promise today? To a growing, disillusioned crowd, the answer is a hollow one. Overpriced food wrapped in the faded glow of neon nostalgia. If Sin City cannot claw back its identity from the brink, it faces the ultimate punishment: total irrelevance. No one travels thousands of miles to experience mediocrity. They demand spectacle. They demand a story. And above all else, they demand value. Without that, the restaurants in Vegas will continue to bleed customers, and the legendary glow of the Strip will inevitably fade into darkness. But this isn't just a crisis of identity. It's a human catastrophe. The city is losing the very people who are its lifeblood, the workers, and their testimonies expose the most agonizing truths yet. This is the brutal reality for the workers, the voices from the trenches. Behind every single glittering facade and pulsing neon sign is an army of people who breathe life into Las Vegas. The servers, the bartenders, the cooks, the hosts, the dishwashers, and right now their desperate cries of warning are ringing louder and truer than any sanitized economic report ever could. Vegas is dead, a local influencer declared with chilling finality, exposing a desperate reality where even the most elite restaurants are reduced to begging vloggers for free publicity, just to fill their empty seats. That one statement lays bare a horrifying truth. The city's own employees feel utterly abandoned, trapped inside a system that is visibly crumbling around them. The staff tell horror stories of weeknights where dining rooms are ghostly voids, and their paychecks evaporate with every canceled shift. For the tipped workers, it's a descent into an even deeper nightmare, where the false promise of automatic gratuities offers no real protection. Instead, guests openly revolt against these charges, trapping servers in humiliating confrontations, while the dwindling flow of tourists means the big tippers, the ones who kept them afloat, are nowhere to be found. The international clientele, the very people who once indulged in lavish multi-course feasts and tipped with abandon, have vanished into thin air. And make no mistake, the cooks and the back-of-house staff see the rot setting in from the inside. One moment they're crafting extravagant menus for phantom luxury crowds. The next, they're scrambling to serve all-you-can-eat slop as management makes another desperate last-ditch pivot to bargain basement discounts. This relentless, sickening swing between faux exclusivity and raw desperation is leaving entire teams utterly exhausted and spiritually broken. They're left questioning if they're in a five-star kitchen or a cheap cut-rate buffet, while even the managers confess, in hushed tones, that they are completely lost in uncharted, treacherous waters. The resorts are now frantically ditching long-standing fees, secretly whispering about resurrecting old-school Vegas deals in a desperate bid to ignite even a flicker of traffic. But for the workers on the ground, these panicked reactive measures are nothing more than a slap in the face, far too little, far too late. As one employee grimly observed, you can't sell $1,000 steaks every night. Eventually, you're just staring at empty tables. The emotional devastation is catastrophic. The employees of Las Vegas have always accepted a brutal bargain of long hours and demanding crowds. But it was a price they paid for the intoxicating energy of the Strip. That relentless rush, the electric buzz of packed houses. That's what made it all worthwhile. But now that energy is flickering and dying. And with it goes the pride that was the lifeblood of this entire industry. And here is the terrifying warning. If the very people who are Las Vegas, the workers who feed, serve, and entertain, lose all faith in the city's future, then no amount of glossy marketing or empty promises can possibly save it. This brings us to the most horrifying reality of all. What happens when the very foundation of the Strip, the dining industry, finally begins to buckle and collapse? A total collapse on the Strip. When dining becomes the breaking point for a city built on a sacred promise that no matter who you were or what your budget was, you could always find a meal, a table, and a story to take home. But today, the city's restaurants are exposing a much deeper, more rotten truth. When the dining scene fails, the entire Las Vegas model begins to catastrophically unravel. The warning signs are everywhere, screaming from every corner. Graveyards of empty chairs at once legendary buffets. Steakhouse menus have been silently butchered, slashed in half. Fast food joints on the Strip are now charging more than actual sit-down restaurants in other cities, while terrified employees whisper of a staggering 20 to 30% collapse in business. Tourists are plastering TikTok with videos mocking the absurdity of $45 burgers and $17 cocktails. And the locals? They're abandoning their own city, dining anywhere else. They've been completely priced out, abandoning the Strip because the math has become an insult. And why is this a catastrophe? Because restaurants were never just a side attraction. They are the very glue holding the entire Vegas illusion together. A satisfying meal was meant to fuel a long night at the tables. A cocktail special was the gateway to a club. A cheap breakfast was designed to keep gamblers chained to the casino floor until noon. But when food is no longer a viable loss leader, the dominoes don't just fall. They crash with devastating force through the hotels, the casinos, and the showrooms. You can bet the investors are already panicking. The giant hospitality corporations that once treated their dining operations as a mere afterthought are now desperately depending on them to plug the gaping holes left by collapsing casino revenues. But the harder they try to gouge their customers with hidden fees, insulting surcharges, and grotesquely inflated prices, the faster the diners vanish for good. It is a terrifying death spiral, on full horrifying display in every half-empty restaurant that haunts Las Vegas Boulevard. And let me be perfectly clear, this is not some seasonal slump. The workers and the locals know it. Even the influencers are admitting they have never witnessed the Strip this dead, this lifeless, during what should be its absolute peak. If dining, the most fundamental human draw, can no longer survive in this city of spectacle, then what hope in hell do any of its higher-priced fantasies have? Oh, Vegas has stared into the abyss before. Recessions, market crashes, even a global pandemic. But this is different. This feels like a terminal illness because it's an attack on the very soul of the city. A Las Vegas without packed, buzzing restaurants is like a Broadway stage without a single clap of applause. The neon lights may still flicker weakly, but the soul has been extinguished. So let's face the brutal, undeniable truth. Unless Las Vegas wages a war to reclaim its very roots, value, accessibility, and raw energy, this catastrophic collapse of its dining scene won't just be the end of cheap eats. It will be the beginning of this city's long, agonizing slide into total irrelevance. The restaurant scene in Las Vegas isn't just failing. It's a blaring siren warning of a city teetering on the brink of collapse. When every meal is an act of extortion and dining rooms are ghost towns, the very foundation of the Strip begins to crack. I say this out of a deep concern for Vegas, but the city is deaf to the cries of its own people, the workers and the visitors. This madness has to be stopped before the point of no return is crossed. What is your verdict on this catastrophe? Unleash your stories in the comments, and make sure you subscribe, because we are not letting this critical story fade into the neon glow.